Welcome to episode 2 of Inside the Barrel, where Jon and I talk about behind the scenes work at Cask, working as consultants, mostly in the technical field of ServiceNow and trying to solve, client problems. So welcome to the day before St. Patty's Day. So hopefully you have the day off tomorrow if you are in the Northeast or Irish and you are having fun. In today's talk, we're going to talk about importing 1 million records daily and how you can set up your system to do so. This happened for a client of ours that really wanted to import a lot of data on a daily basis without bogging down the system. And so we had to really push ServiceNow's platform to the limits. And so we're excited to kind of, walk you through some of the topics that we'd cover. So Jon, if you want to kind of bring up a notepad and we can kind of get started with, describing the problem we're trying to solve and then kind of where we would go with the solution.
Yeah, let's see here. What was that site I went to last time?
Yeah, where were the tools we used last time for Notepad? While you look it up, I'll kind of talk about it. So a lot of the times you're normally using ServiceNow to import data from like a pull method. And so essentially what happens is you pull from LDAP or you pull from some database somewhere or some REST API, and then you transform that data and import it. It's normally a one-time activity or, very, maybe 100,000 records or something like that. The reason a different solution needed to be created was because the client didn't want to give authentication to that database or didn't want to give authentication to an AWS instance from a cloud infrastructure. So essentially we had to build a solution around push model in order to solve this use case.
Okay, I have found an online notepad. It looks pretty nice.
You want to share your screen?
Yeah. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about some of the requirements. Needed to be push, so we needed ServiceNow to be able to handle receiving data. It needed to be able to support, millions of records daily. And so, there's a few different use cases for that. Let's say you had, you want to do some data science on, a bunch of data that generates records and predictions. So like that could be a use case on when you get 1 million records daily. It could also be you are integrating with another people or transaction data. Let's say you're a credit card company and you want to interact with transactions. You may have, millions of those. So those are probably some of the common ones, either a data science or some transactional data that you would want a solution like this to support.
So you don't actually need to interact with transactions as one of the, that's not a criteria.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, when would you see this use case
Sure.
of importing 1 million records? Like normally you don't have 1 million employees, daily, right? So, yeah. And then the other thing is it needed to run within less than 30 minutes. And so, if you do the traditional import, it would probably take you hours to run this. So they needed to run under 30 minutes.
Wow, that's quick for 1 million records.
Yeah. And a transform map, right? So, okay.
And a transform map.
Let's kind of talk about the architecture we would do with this. So in order to support push, you really have two options. In Quebec, you have flow designers, REST API trigger. But for non-Quebec, you have a scripted REST endpoint, essentially. And so in this one, we'll play with the scripted REST API just because I don't trust that Quebec's REST API is going to be ready just out of the gate to support 1 million record payload. So pretty much after the REST API, essentially we're going to need to touch concurrent import sets. We're going to need to touch data sources. We're going to need to touch transform maps. We'll probably build a script include. So those are some of the technologies or parts of the platform that we'll utilize. So does that kind of sound like a good plan, John?
Yeah, I love it. I love scripted REST APIs.
Yeah, cool. So let's dive into that. So if you want to switch over to it. So I'm a big fan of creating what I call dumb scripted REST endpoints. I like my REST APIs to be as simple as possible, and then have the code in a reusable state elsewhere. So
script include, huh?
So eventually, after the scripted REST endpoint's created, we just want to pass the data to a script include and let the script include do everything.
So what do you want to start with, the scripted REST API?
Yeah, let's start that and just press new. Yeah, normally you name this something, related to your use case. This looks good for us in our use case. I love we're still using the application that we did from last week.
Hey, look at that. What a crash.
Just stop screen sharing.
It crashed my browser and everything. Yeah. So
creating scripted REST endpoints crash your browser.
Well, yeah, something like that. All right, let me get back in to... All right. Okay, we're back.
I'm not a fan when I ever get a list that doesn't have the updated on it.
I don't know why that's... Hey, look at that. Another one just gone. Let's try a different browser.
That's great. It's real love. Right
Kids,
there.
This is why you don't use a development stage browser on a live podcast.
Yeah, I'm assuming your browser had some support for some tools or something like that. Some extensions that you built.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure there's some people at Cask that'll be like, man, I've told him a number of times to quit using those development browsers.
Just gonna drink every time your browser crashes. If not, I can try screen sharing, but I'd rather not.
Why not?
Then my browser's gonna crash, and then it's gonna look like we just have bad browsers.
Cask is known for their terrible browsers. We're almost there. Now, if this crashes, then we really have a problem.
Means that Chrome or Brave or Safari has a memory leak, and you're doing God's work here. You're testing for major corporations.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's share now. Watch your fingers. Hey, look at that. It's working.
Nice. All right. So we're going to use some default security ACLs. That's totally fine. We won't change any of that for this. And we're just going to click new on the resource. And we'll name this like create or bulk maybe, or create. Yeah, bulk's fine. And then the HTTP method. would be a post.
Now, are we using post because it's such a large data object as opposed to get?
Yeah, so normally get's used to pull. So if we're using like that standard, what's the purpose of HTTP methods? Normally your post is when you use to generate or create records. Get's normally when you pull records. Put is when you either, could also be used with post, but either like a modification, and the same thing with patch. So normally I stick to post when I'm just pushing or creating new data. So great. So what do we put in this script? So my preference is to essentially generate a background worker. And so normally what this importer would do is it would have to run and wait for all of that code to be processed if you wrote all the logic in here. So normally I like to throw it into a background processor. So I think I actually did a little bit of cheating this time, John, and sent you some code.
So like on the cooking shows, I'm going to put this in the oven
yeah.
and pull it out. Boom, look at that. I just pulled it out of the oven. It is...
Did you just copy all and replace all? Yeah, perfect. All right, so let's talk about this. So on like line yeah, it's beautiful. Line 4 is essentially us pulling the body, right? So just if anytime you wanted to pull the data out, the downside of this is this serializes it, and so I haven't been able to figure out a way to not serialize the data before pulling it in, because it would drastically speed up our REST endpoint if we didn't have to serialize. So if anyone does find a way to not serialize this before passing it along, like super interested. And essentially pretty much from line 5, we do a little bit of error handling. We just check to make sure that it has data in it. And if so, we just send a response back of a 201. And if it doesn't have any data in it, we send a 400 back. And that's pretty much what I refer to as like a dumb API. It's just does basic handling, passes it along to a worker, and then sets the status. And so in this case, essentially what we're doing is we created a worker. So that's what that glide scripted hierarchical worker is. We're gonna have to create a script include for people REST API helper. So, and then we're passing the request body into it, and we're calling a method from the script include. So feel free to utilize this if you ever wanted to create a very simple REST API that spins up a worker. This is kind of the format that you can use. So yeah, so that's it. We completed a REST API.
Nice.
Let's go and create that script include and see what we can, and one function at least called run async.
I'm not so happy about that auto setting. It flips you over into a namespace versus leaving you over here. I really hate that, because you end up overriding whichever whatever field it puts you in.
Yeah.
And just drives me nuts. All right, so now you want a new one in global. Let's just turn a few things on here. So we are in global. All right. Does this need to be accessible from anywhere else?
I normally do all application scopes in this case. Well, interesting. I think you need to actually be in the global scope.
I am in global.
No, remember we're in our. Oh, you're right. We created a scoped app. That's a global scoped app. So cool. We're okay. I just realized it's our application is in this user actions. So. Okay.
So a bit of advice here: be careful how you set these things up if you're doing apps that go to the share store or that you're going to sell, ServiceNow is very particular about security and how you have these set up. So like if you click client callable and you never use it from the client, they'll call you out on that. I learned that the hard way one time.
Yeah, so I'm going to send you some more cooking in the oven for you.
Oh, sweet. My oven is on and ready.
So I just sent you the run async function. And we'll talk about it. All right. So I actually added comments on this one. That's great.
And as a consultant, you should be putting comments in your code.
Yes, I think any developer in general, you should add a description to the script include. So when you generate release notes, right, it's auto done. It's okay.
And for people like, for things like this, for me, I wish there was an automatic way of generating the comments, because if you know me, you know how bad I am with comments.
Yeah, we need JS docs, right?
Right. Yes. Seriously.
Maybe that is there now when you use Visual Studio Code. I don't know.
I think you can add it as an extension, but I broke a bunch of stuff when I tried it one time.
Yeah, I agree. I would avoid it too. So essentially, what do we want our functions to do, right? Once our scripted REST endpoint receives data, essentially we want to do a few things. We want it to create a data source, and we want to also create a concurrent scheduled import. And what that means is the data source is just going to hold the JSON payload that comes in. And then the concurrent import set is going to look at that data source and then, iterate and transform all of that data. So those are the two things that were the main two things that we're going to try to do. But before we can, do that, we have to actually write the attachment to the data source. So we need to create a function called write attachments. Do you want me to just send you this code in the oven?
Sure. I think we all know how bad I am at spelling a lot of times, and so I love this oven though. I mean, this is an awesome oven.
Yeah. All right. So
you set it and forget it.
So this should be, so now we just wrote the write attachment function.
All right, here's a question.
Yeah.
Above or below? What's your preference when adding functions?
Doesn't matter. In JavaScript. I know.
See, I always write them above.
Okay.
I don't know why. It just seems to be the way that I do it. I put them, like if I'm working on this function here and I'm typing it all up and I have to write something inside, I do it above it so I don't lose, I can stay where I'm at.
The only argument that I'd have against that in this case is I don't want to see a bunch of helper functions before I see what the code is actually meant to do, right? So that run async is that main thing that's telling us everything that this script is going to do. And then,
so how do you feel about writing helpers with an underscore?
So you could, yeah, I'm fine with that.
I see that a lot, that people do the helpers with the underscore just to segregate and, know what's doing what. So you have a main function here and you know that this is not a main function, but a helper of sorts.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay, well then you're gonna have to do that for all of them. But so essentially to talk about this, writing attachment, essentially all we're doing is we're creating a new data source, right? And that's why I call it temporary. We're checking if we've already given one that exists, right? So like if we're passing in the data source and it already exists, which we assume it will because we're creating it first, then we go and add this attachment, the request body as an attachment. So that's really all this function's doing. We could even make this fancy with glide query in the future. but that's for another time. Okay, so now I'm going to send you some beautiful more chickpeas for the oven. Do you like keeping in the comments an example of how you would run this? Like, that's a question that I have for you.
I think it's beneficial, whoever comes along after you, after we've left the project, the next admin or whoever that has to take this over will probably go, oh, thank you for putting how to run this in here.
Yeah, because I think I find that a couple times as well, where it would have been nice to just copy and paste some, new call the function dot whatever that is. So I think just making,
setting up something for like your tables, so you would have you see why I hate typing.
So yeah, that's normally good, but remember, we want this to be robust, right? So you're saying for the actual tables?
Just your something to have them available, because they're not going to change. What are they called? Constants?
Yeah, constants. Yeah. Is that how you write the constant in the scripting?
See, now you've asked me the question, and I'd have to go check. I have it working somewhere.
Interesting. I mean, that's cool if that's how you do it, because
it's something like this.
Tough.
Okay. Let me check real quick. I'll let you know in 2 shakes. It's in an oven somewhere.
I also sent you the next function for us to talk about is creating the data source.
Okay.
I like it. See, when we don't have the answer or we don't know it, we just Google it.
Well, I'm actually trying to log into an instance, and I can't
remember
my login.
I'm going to try Googling it faster. Constant variables in scripted REST. Scripted.
All right, there we go.
Someone from 2016. What is the best approach to declare constants in an application? And Chuck, from ServiceNow's dev program, says, you could throw it in the initialize.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. I think the initialize, though, doesn't that require like a this in front of it or something to that effect?
It would. Yep. And you could also throw it in a gs.get property. Yeah, so it looks like declaring constant. Oh, there's a 2019 post about it. Yeah, people are like, put in a system property. Ugh. I don't want to put in a system property.
I am not seeing the way that okay. I have to like go way back. I thought it was a different mechanism.
Maybe another time for it.
Yeah, probably.
Chevy time checking.
2 seconds. 2 seconds, and then I'll be like, yeah, we're done here. All right, here we go. No, not that one. Yeah, so I guess outside of it, I think as long as you do it in an object format, as long as you do it that way, I think you're able to call it like that. All right, but you said you sent me some more goodies.
Yeah, so I sent you how to create that temporary data source. Yep, and so you're gonna have to change that on line 9 as well. Yep. And so essentially what this is doing is it creates a data source and then we'll attach that attachment to it. And so if you've ever created a data source, there are some required fields. So like the name, the import set table, the type it's going to be, what's the root node, what's the retrieval method. So yeah, so it looks like that's essentially set up and good. So I need to send you another goodie. So now that we have a data source, we've attached our payload to that data source, we need to be able to run, an import set on it. And I'm also trying to change the name of this function, so I'm trying to make sure it's set up for you as well.
Well, if there's anything inside we had to change, just let me know.
Yeah, no, you're good. Just trying to send you, not burnt toast, so.
Or burnt popcorn, or burnt fish.
All right, I think that would work good. Okay.
Oh, that's a big one.
This is a big guy. Well, there was some comments in it too, but so if you've never created an import set, it wants a lot more information. Like essentially, it wants to tell you, you want to know what data source it's coming from, who you're going to run it as, if it's active or not, if you want to run it periodically. And so I set the run period to be 10 hours in the past, and then I do the next start to be 30 seconds in the future. So there's just some funky, if you are trying to understand why I did that. It was just easier that way rather than having to execute it. I essentially started in the future, or started from the past and then do it 30 seconds in the future. Cool. So yeah, I think that's mostly it. I think we just need to make sure we have your run as set correctly. So that should be so notice how on line 12 and 13, they're essentially some staging table, right? So just make sure you're referencing the correct staging table rather than just my text. So line 12, it says some staging table. Yeah, reference your.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then for the sysid, so I would create a new variable for like a run as user. And that'll be a sysid. It'll probably just be the sysid of your system administrator for this purpose, and replace that with line 16, like at the end of line 16. It
right.
should call it run as.
All right, let's see what our and that's just the sysid, right?
Yep. Awesome. So do you want to go and create a staging table and a normal table? I think we're good for this right now. We do need to create a cleanup function, which let me just send you that while we're here. The last thing you want is like to create all of these every time a payload's sent and then not clean it up. Awesome. Okay. So let's just like if you could have another tab for the data source. I just kind of want to show what the data source. I mean, we wrote a bunch of code for data source, so it would be good to just show an example of, in the system, like how you would get to manually create a data source.
And where am I going for that?
Just type data source.
Oh.
And then space source. And perfect. And then just click new. So just, to give you an idea of those fields, notice I'm just essentially setting these fields. Instead, the format will be JSON. Yep. And you have to do a path for each row. So this is the tricky one for path for each row. If the data comes in a format that's like an array, for example, you would have to do // because that's just something that is really hard to find in documentation. But if it comes in as like a JSON object with, let's say predictions and then an array of data, you'd have to do prediction/predictions. So you always do your highest level node twice in this case for the path for each row. But if you don't have a highest level node, you just do //. So
we're just doing //.
Yeah, and that in our example, but we're not going to create this because our code is going to create it for us, and it's going to.
No, I got you.
So yeah, so let's open up a import set real quick, a concurrent import set actually, and it should be in a different space or concurrent import sets under advanced. Yeah. So this is where it's eventually going to be, and it doesn't manually let us do it. And I think let's just go to a normal import set. I think you can actually create them from here. Okay, won't let us manually create them. That's fine. Cool. So yeah, we're essentially going to create them on this table, and we'll be able to reference it when we send some code. All right, so let's create a staging table and for this, and let's then create a new table, and we'll do a transform map for it. Hopefully our payload is very simple.
So the staging table is just a normal table?
Yes. So just go to tables and then new, and name this people or something, whatever you want to name it. And just make sure it people staging maybe. Yeah. And then needs to extend the import set row. Yeah, perfect. Submit it. Boom. And then let's create another table. Awesome. And then that'll just be our main table now. So just people. Perfect. Submit it. And on our staging table, let's just put a field called name and make it a string. It's probably good enough for this purpose. String. And let's do. I think you're on the wrong one. That's for
reference.
Let's just do 100 characters or something like that. Normally, if we were, I don't think, that was the right one, right? Okay, cool. Yep. Normally you would want to do it in like different, like 64 or 128 or whatever those numbers are, but 100 is fine for our testing purposes. Cool. So now we also need that field on the main table as well. And you normally actually don't even need to create that. Originally in the staging one, if you're going to send a payload, it's going to generate and create all of them, whatever's in your payload when you run it. But we know what the field's going to be called, so we can create it in advance. Cool. So now we just need a transform map for the, oh yeah, now you have those. Awesome. So we'll need a transform map for a given staging table. Yep, so let's create a new transform map. Should be the staging one, awesome. And then the target one will be people. We don't want to run business rules, and that's fine. Okay, submit that. Let's open up that one. So we could do some logic on befores and after and on complete, but I don't think we need to in this case. So I think all we just need to do is map some fields. So just do a mapping assist. I think we should be able to just click mapping assist and it'll work. And then name it to be named. Boom. I think you have to add it.
Oh,
yeah.
There you go.
Save it. Cool. So that's very simple transform. And let's coalesce on that field, I guess.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you if you wanted to coalesce on that bad boy.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Shall we test to see if our payload is gonna work?
Sure. Why not?
So let's do the test in REST Explorer. So if you go to, I think it's REST API Explorer. Yeah. Explorer. And then if you change the namespace to be our app. No, I think it's the namespace is actually the name of our app, so all the way on the bottom. Ooh, maybe it's under now, and then change the. That's weird. It should have been. No, it's not going to be here. Or maybe it will. Okay. So let's go to the scripted REST endpoint. The easiest way to get to it is.
Yeah, that'll give it to you.
Nice. What did we do wrong? Oh, 9.
Oh, it's that weird.
Weird number. Great. Okay, and now let's scroll down under raw, and let's paste like just a little bit of a payload. So just it'd be an array with a few names or something like that.
Let's see. Do I still have? Probably not because everything crashed though.
I think you sent it to me. Okay.
Oh, I have it. It's right here. Let me just get.
You don't need to send the whole thing, just a few. Because my guess is this is gonna break. So we'll need to figure out where it breaks.
All right, and then I need one closer on that.
Cool. Hey, what do you know? 201. So now let's go check to see if we have a temporary. Let's go to data source.
Oh, data source.
Yeah, let's see if a data source was created. And then so hey, what do you know? We got a data source. And it attached a file. Oh my gosh. And it has a transform. That's awesome. I don't have to worry about that for now. Okay, so let's look at our concurrent transform scripts. Yeah, import, yeah, that one. Do we have an import set too? Oh, we even have an import set? This actually worked.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. So For those that have never used import sets, what it does is it looks at your JSON or any of your files and splits it across multiple nodes. And so in this case, it's split it across 2 of them. Do we actually get errors?
I don't think we did get any errors.
Nice. Let's go type in people.
Yeah, 0 errors. Well, technically, they're not people; they're animals.
Well, no, I meant you just go to people. You could have just typed people. I think we created a menu for it, but dude, look at that. That actually worked.
That's pretty neat.
So I mean, we could push the limit here and make a bigger payload if you want.
So behind the scenes here, I'm using this site called Makaroo to generate. I can generate at least 5,000 records on the free account. Now, if I was going to pay monthly for it, I could do 100,000. But you can only get the 5,000 from actually calling it from a like Postman.
Yeah.
So let me share that little bit.
Well, at least, yeah, and let's try with 5,000, right? So.
Yeah, right. So here we are with Postman, and what this allows you to do is so I've got this fake API, right? I built it on Makaroo. It's very simple. It's just name, and they actually give you, when you build it out, they give you a field type, and one of them is called animal common names or app names. And they just have all these different things you can use to generate data. And I just picked the first one, these animal names. And they'll let you do up to, like I said, they'll let you do up to 5,000. So when you grab it and you run it, you will get your 5,000. So I can come in here and copy all those out, and then we can go back to our, where was it? Here. We can come back here and do the so now we should have at least 5,000 in there, a whole lot.
Awesome.
And then we can just and boom, done.
Cool.
So it says it's all done. Now, if we come back into here,
well, I would go check our data source first. Because I wonder if we got to clean up our old one. Hey, look at that! Our old one's gone too. This code is working beautifully. It's great. Now let's go to concurrent import sets. And you notice how that first one's empty because it cleared it out, right? We cleaned up that data. If you wanted to keep them there, obviously you could keep them. I'm just more of a fan of not. And notice how it split them across, it looks like 2 different import set jobs. And it's loading them, and it took 16 seconds to split it. What that means is it took 16 seconds to look at your whole payload and then decide how many nodes it needs to split across. And if you go to the jobs themselves.
So the 16 seconds is combined. It's not 16 and 16. It's just 16 altogether to just determine how it splits it. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
And then if we go to the concurrent import set jobs tab, these are, it's running, those import sets. So it looks like it actually knew. So then the next thing I actually want us to check that I ran into an issue before is to make sure you have enough nodes to split it. So this is essentially what we need to do is go to the sys trigger table. And it's not gonna, just put trigger and then do .capital list. It's okay. Fine. Just to show them, you can do that. And then we're gonna filter by name. So in the name, type in import space set space transformer. So notice how there's 4 of these. Can you add on the cog a new field to the list and do this one as the system ID? Yeah, awesome. So here is essentially how many nodes you have, right? And so it looks like on these dev instances we only have 1 node anyway, so our concurrent import set is impossible. But in your environment you may have 2 to 4. In order for, if it's not working for you, you just need to make sure at least one of them has the active nodes, right? So notice how there is an option here that says active nodes on the system ID, so that's already set up for us. But just FYI, if you notice this and they're all just set to the instances, just make sure at least one is active nodes, and then you should be good. So like you could have one where like if you had 10 import set transformers, like then you may have like, let's say 6 that are records for 1 through 5, and then 1 that's an active node, right? So so if you do run into issues that why isn't my concurrent import set working, just make sure you check this table. And that's it, right? So let's check our table now. Let's see how long it actually took.
I guess you say with other people, right?
Yeah.
Hey, look at that. Oh man,
I think it's still running, or we didn't have 5,000 unique, maybe?
It's possible.
Click on the all button again, so refresh it. Yeah, maybe. So let's go to that concurrent import set again. And then, yeah, it looks like it finished it.
Is there does the imports, or does one of the import tables show us the total number of records that got brought in?
Yeah, if you click on click on the last one, the most recent one, and click on import set jobs for this, or transform histories, I think it is. It's actually transform histories of the related list. Yeah, this will tell you. So it split the 5,000 into 2, and it took 13 seconds to do so.
Oh, so maybe there are duplicates then.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
So you were saying originally, if we were going to do 1 million records, can you extrapolate 5,000 at 13 seconds to 1 million? Quick.
Yeah,
Where's your oven?
Yeah. I don't know if that logic pans out, because it does depend on how many nodes you have, right? So
right. Yeah.
But when we tested this on a client, it was about 15 minutes for 600,000 records. So that puts us just under. And they were doing a lot more complex of a transform map too.
Sure. Yeah, we're doing a single name there.
And so I mentioned. Oh, yeah, another question.
Well, I was just going to say, this is one of those things that you want to set up in off-peak times too, huh? You don't want to run this during the middle of the day, because it will bog down the system and you'll lose performance.
Correct. Yeah. And 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. To local time, whatever you're doing, is probably a good idea. Same that you do with your import sets of like LDAP or CMDB and things like that. So the other thing I mentioned, right, was like ideally in Quebec, we don't even have to build that scripted REST endpoint. You could do it from Flow Designer and select scripted REST endpoint. Maybe we'll take this example and see if we can throw it at Flow Designer and see how it works. The good thing about this is very scalable. Like if you needed to create a new endpoint, right, you just create the new endpoint, and you can reuse that script include. So it's very easy to throw multiple endpoints if you needed to in the future.
Yeah, and I think scripted REST endpoints are so simple to write out anyways. And it's much more controllable versus the magic behind Flow Designer that you don't have access to. I love playing with the scripted REST APIs, but of course, for me, it's always coming from a portal context, and it's fun that way because you can pull all this data in and then render it out in a portal real easy. But it's nice to see how it works on the back end to actually store the data first, and then you can pull it into a portal or what have you. So it's neat to see the other side of that, because this one time I had a client who wanted a completely stateless experience. It was for pulling in confidential information that they wanted to only be at that moment. The moment you closed the browser, it was gone. It didn't get stored anywhere within the system. And so it was all scripted REST APIs to bring it over. And it was fun to build that, but it's neat to see how you can do it with an actual, saving the data and being able to call it out later and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, like just loading it into memory, right? And then, accessing it and then, getting rid of it.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, it was just the nature of the data that they had. Like I said, it was confidential info, and so they wanted to make sure that there wasn't a way, that an admin couldn't go in and do it. I mean, you still could. I think I built it around. I think there's a mechanism to make sure that even impersonation, I based it on the actual login, not impersonation. So you couldn't even impersonate someone to go look at it.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
And that was a fun one.
Or maybe it's a different podcast. So cool. I mean, I'm actually really surprised this worked, by the way. Like, I just want to say that
it's the oven. The oven's
something that took me like weeks to do for a client. We were able to do in less than an hour. So,
well, when you have those magic ovens, man, the baking happens like that.
Yeah.
Go to commercial break, come back, it's all done.
Cool. So, if, just a little shout out, if, you like these or you have topics that you want us to try to tackle, we try to not do this scripted, so just give us a problem. This time we've already done this problem before, so it was a little bit easier, but we are more than willing to try to tackle tough problems or complex problems and fail doing it. So
hey, it's the consultant life though.
Yeah.
You get these. The client will come up and be like, "Hey, we want to do A, B, and C," and you're like, "I have never done that before."
Yeah, and it's always like, especially in the ServiceNow space, because it's this application platform as a service, it's like they want it tweaked just a little bit different than somebody else. And it's like that little tweak to them in their mind is like, oh, that should be easy. And it's like completely changes everything.
Yeah, no business, no two businesses are alike in their desires. It is crazy.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think we're good. I mean, I'm stoked that this worked and we had time to spare. So
yes, we actually got it to work. It's complete and we're done. Wow, look at that.
What do you drink on St. Patty's Day? What is the normal thing you're supposed to drink?
Oh, well, so if I wasn't doing keto, I'd go get one of those green shakes from McDonald's, right? That are so minty. No. They make your eyes water. They're so minty they make your eyes water. Shamrock shake. That's what it's called.